Hey everyone, welcome back to the Promised Land podcast, a Q&A special and your comments answered. I've been wanting to do one of these for quite a little while. But, things have been difficult in Manchester United land, haven't they? And you don't really want to get behind a microphone and talk about the dross that we're often seeing and the misery that we're seeing. You don't even want to engage with it too much. But I think off the back of a positive-ish draw with Arsenal, I thought this was the right time to maybe go through some of the recent videos and podcasts that I've done, take some of your comments and roll them all into one show where I can talk about the big things that are happening, bigger picture stuff, and just address the future and address some of the players that we're seeing issues with and how United get out of this mess. The Promised Land podcast and the name of the Promised Land podcast, we came up with it with the idea of charting how Man United get back to that moment of reaching the Promised Land. You know that famous Clive Tilsley quote in 1999, Manchester United have reached the Promised Land after Ole Gunnar Solskjaer scored that goal against Bayern Munich. That's where the name comes from. If you're new to this pod, that's where it comes from. And it seems at the moment that, well, it's true. United are farther away from that point than I think they've ever been in that entire time since 1999. It's a difficult one at the moment, but some positive signs. I think we just need to get through to the end of this season and just look at the squad on the whole, make some difficult decisions and start rebuilding. Not the rebuild that we've seen United do a few times before, but not really do it properly. This has to be the rebuild, which is the actual rebuild. There's a quote from that I've got in my running order here, which quotes the famous Ralph Rangnick open heart surgery line. It is a little bit overdone, but United haven't really. I know they've changed the squad around, but they haven't really done it in the sense of what Rangnick said in terms of getting the young players on first, second big contracts who will run all day. I think that's the point that we're at now, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, subscribe to the podcast if you have not done so already and you would like to. The Promised Land of Manchester United podcast is on Apple, Spotify, and all audio platforms, I do believe. Also on YouTube as well, the Promised Land of Manchester United podcast. Please like the video, drop a comment because I'd love to do more of these. And subscribe to the channel as well. Also on those audio platforms, please give the pod a 5-star review. If you've not done so already, I would really, really appreciate that. Tell your mates as well to listen to it if they're looking for something a little bit more realistic than the noise you always hear from pundits. From Tim Howard last week, remember that? Where he was saying that the Glazers have, I can't remember exactly what he said now. I don't really want to revisit it, but that's the kind of nonsense that you're getting. That's the kind of nonsense that is fed to you, that it's all to pile into this endless cycle of misery, which we're all subjected to. It's bad enough on the pitch as it is without former players coming out and saying just pure nonsense in the press. And it was rightly called out because it was completely wrong. But, that's where we are. Anyway, let's get into your questions. I've sectioned them up into an Ineos and recruitment section, a Rasmus Hojlund section, a Bruno Fernandes and playmakers section, and some general comments towards the end as well. I do see you guys in the comment sections. A lot of you are commenting on every video, and I really, really appreciate the support. I really do. If you can spread the word and engage with any tweets I put out around the podcast, this kind of thing, please do that. And spread the word, because I do think that a little bit more sense, I'm not saying that I'm the most sensible guy in the world, but, a little bit more sense and a little bit more logic being brought to the party, I think is necessary at the moment because of the nonsense that we are subjected to in the media. It doesn't really help make anybody feel any better, especially when performances are as bad as they have been. But after the Arsenal game, not so bad. Some hope to cling on to. Hopefully United can get through in the Europa League over the next few days. We'll see. But first comment is from LVGA2756. We need to sign more hungry players like Aiden Heaven. There are more young players around Europe who can play this system. I'm tired of Dalot and Garnacho, honestly. Sell them for pure profit and let's move on. I think I made this point in the post-Arsenal podcast that I did go check that out if you've not done so already. I think I said something along the lines of this. Aiden Heaven, I thought, was really good in the Arsenal game. He came on at halftime, obviously, for Lenny Yoro's picked up an injury. But I think he was quite assured. Ruben Amorim said he was relaxed and maybe a little bit too relaxed. But I think he does have the looking at him, the way that he plays, his stature, it looks like he'll grow out into a really strong physical centre back who has good ability on the ball. He's played in midfield, obviously, before in his youth days. And that is, I think, what the direction that Ineos are going to have to go down and the recruitment team are going to have to go down. Christopher Vivell is obviously in charge of recruitment now. He's been made full-time and permanent. And I think more players like this you will see arrive at Old Trafford. Diego Leon is going to join in the summer. He's a left wing back coming from South America. And look, these are very small cost signings with potential upside, and United need to get to that point where they try them out in the first team, see if they're good enough. If they can hang, they can become first team players. They could stick around, or United could end up selling them for profit, even if that's like a 10, 20 million fee to a club in the mid-tier in the Premier League or something like that. That's the way that United are going to fix themselves. It's going to be a slow process, but that is the right way to recruit. And you see other teams like, I don't want to make these comparisons to the likes of Brighton and Bournemouth, but the reason why the likes of Brighton and Bournemouth are better than Man United at the moment is because they do things like that. And they've managed to jump over United and Tottenham and a lot of the big teams. Bournemouth should have beat Tottenham at the weekend as well. And that's how football's going. That's where football's going. United don't have a team at the moment that is physically capable of playing the way that Ruben Amorim wants. And that's why you see the low block that he's talking about that he played against Arsenal. But yeah, just to go back to that comment, I think Aiden Heaven is promising. We don't know how good he will be, obviously, but I think early signs are good. And there are definitely more players like this in academies, in other countries. And I think Christopher Vivell has a real good background of picking players out from the age of 16 in different academies across Europe, bringing them to the club that he's at, and then they develop them into first team players and end up selling them for profit, or they play as first team players for a good period of time. And I'm not saying that United should become a selling club, but they're going to need to get better at sales. I saw somebody, again, quote the other day that David Beckham is still among United's top 3, top 5 biggest sales of all time, or somewhere in among the top. He was 25 million quid in 2003. That shows how bad United are at selling players. And you need to be able to sell players well in order to compete nowadays, and United are bad at it. So, this is the right way to go. And that comment also addressed, I'm tired of Dallo and Garnacho, honestly, sell them for pure profit and let's move on. I think there might be, as I've said on previous podcasts as well, 1 or 2 sales which do have to come in and alleviate the problem. And I know that that's a potentially unpopular thing to say, but you saw the interest that Garnacho got from Chelsea in January. Obviously, that deal didn't go through. Napoli were trying to sign him as well. I think Garnacho really suits in this system more the right side, but I do still question whether he is the right fit for the team that Ruben Amorim wants to build. And maybe there are some big sales that are necessary in order to get United out of the hole that they're in. So, I think you might just have to gear up for that. And I'm expecting one of those as well. Who it is, I don't know. I haven't really spoke about Kobbie Mainoo too much yet, but there's been some noise around him over the past few days. Not on my list to talk about today, but I will maybe talk about him and his contract status in an episode to come. But Steve Hugg 83 says the public perception has been a problem for years now. Since 2013, we finished in the top 4 on 5 occasions. That's 5 times in 12 seasons. We've won 2 Champions League knockout ties since 2011. So why on earth do we think that we should be finishing in the top 4 every season and be competing in the Champions League? There's nothing to back those claims up. I think this season is about accepting where we are at best, a mid-table team, and things need to change. To be honest, I think if you're adjusting your expectations to something like this, when you spell out the facts like that, United aren't the Manchester United everybody thinks that they are, and they haven't been for a long time. And when you put it down like that, it's pretty bleak. So I think public perception, as I spoke about on a podcast last week, it needs to change. And United needs a reality check, really. And I think this might be the summer that we do end up getting it. A change in the transfer policy, and a bunch of other things are going to change. Cutting costs. We've already seen the pain that United have gone through with those. And that has to go through the playing staff as well. But United need to remodel their team with young, hungry players who are ready to prove themselves instead of signing players that have proven themselves previously that have ended up falling down levels because they can't really play football in the modern way. Just sipping on a coffee before it goes cold, by the way. I've had too many today, but it's necessary for me. Anyway, that's 5 times in 12 seasons and 2 Champions League knockout ties since 2011. That is, when you put it that way, United are nowhere near what everybody thinks that they are. And United have been living on a reputation for a few years now of the success that they had in that era that we all look back on and long for. But you can't, that's not to say that United necessarily can continue doing all the things that they were doing in those days in order to get back to that point. Something needs to change. And I think this season's about accepting where we are at best, a mid-table team, and things need to change. I think that's the approach that I take as well. So, Steve, I see that you comment on a bunch of the shows that I do, and maybe it's because we're pretty much aligned in how we think, and I completely agree with you there. 50 Shades of Skittles 9 says, I have no issues with Ineos. I know it's hard to accept their approach, but they're fixing the Glazers' mistakes. Surprised many fans don't get that. What matters most is going in the right direction, and I do believe in Amorim. Don't change your style. Keep working towards it and replace players not willing to run with others like Dorgu. Again, this is something that I've been saying for a while, and maybe it's good. It's good. I think there's online anyway, probably this is a minority of people that are thinking this way, but this is the right way to, if you just strap in and accept that United are going to have to make some tough decisions and it's going to take some time to fix the mistakes that the Glazers have made. If you just have a long-term view of this, that's probably the right way to approach it, rather than expecting United at every which way to hit the levels that you grew up with watching them hit. It's just the way that it is. Trev G9450 says, consider this. If this director is successful, it's Christopher Vivell. That is going back to a video that I did on him a week or two ago. If this director is successful, he'll be working to find the best wingbacks and centre-backs in the world. He will not be bringing players like Vinny Jr., Salah, Ronaldo, and Giggs, Beckham, or anyone youngsters that shows that kind of ability. He will be bringing Amorim players like Jeremy Frimpong and Dorgu. These are what United fans will be fed for all Amorim's tenure. Forget Amorim's failure to do anything positive since being here, aside from charming the media and the fan base. His system and his formation are not for Manchester United. He is not the way forward unless you want to see a Portuguese team try to play in the Prem. United fans need to see beyond their noses and understand what they're supporting in Ruben Amorim. His football does not fit United's historical DNA, so why are they behind him? I think it's a fair point to make, but at the same time, I double back to a point that I just made. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer tried to come in and play the football that he wanted to play, and ultimately it ended up blowing up in his face because football's changed. Football has changed. And I think what United have appointed in Ruben Amorim is a coach that was, at the time that he joined, among the leading young coaches in European football. He's been dragged down to United's level, obviously. But I think if we keep relying, United need to hold some of their history in there and take it forward with them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything that they used to do is necessarily going to work nowadays. Alex Ferguson had control over every single aspect of the club. And I think part of the problem that United have had in moving on from that Alex Ferguson era is he was ingrained in so many different areas of the club alongside David Gill, and his responsibility was so far and wide that you have to find loads of different people to nowadays anyway cover each area, and United haven't really done that with the right people. So for me, I think I haven't always been like for a back three, and I remember thinking a while ago that I didn't really want to see it, but United have got to move on with the times, and that involves changing the profile of players that you sign and maybe changing the formation as well. So I think it doesn't fit the historical DNA obviously, but 4-4-2 isn't always going to fit the DNA. When Alex Ferguson used to play the 4-4-2 and then he would move to a 4-5-1 in Europe, were people complaining then? Well, no, because the football wasn't great, but at the same time, he was getting results. Alex Ferguson changed. That wasn't necessarily in United's DNA either. They just got to move with the times. So that's how I feel about that one. Angel Uth 12 says, I hope Vivell can resolve the recruitment issue. In my view, the biggest challenge this summer is assembling the best possible squad, not just to fit Amorim's system, but to establish the club as a destination for the world's top players. I don't think it's an impossible task, but rather than spending 150 to 200 million on 3 or 4 players, they just need to sign 8 or 10 who can immediately make United better, competitive, and in the midterm, a top team again. It's not impossible, but the keywords for the summer recruitment strategy must be quality, reliability, and potential. I agree. Completely agree with that. That is how I think United will go. I think that's the only way that they can go as well, with all the financial difficulties that they do have. Tim Chapman 3137 says, I love your style. I'd suggest only Yoro, Dorgu, Mazraoui, Ahmad, Collier, and Ugarte are both good fits. Prob Rasmus too, to be honest, despite current form. And there's a question over whether Mainu has the athleticism for Amorim, and now might be the right time to cash in on both him and Garnacho for me. Now it is a relatively unpopular opinion, because I think if Kobbie Mainu was sold, I don't think he will be, by the way. I think the noise about the contract talks, and as I say, I will talk about this in a bit more depth at some point. Kobbie Mainu has 2 years left on his contract yet, and I think there's an option, a +1 option to trigger on the club's part in that as well. So you really think 3 years left on his contract yet is not really a time to worry. The only thing that will change that is if a team comes in with an 80 million quid offer, cash, and United are looking at it and thinking, well, if he's not that exact natural fit at the moment, is this money that we can use to find perfect natural fits for the system that we want to play? And with that money, you can sign, as was suggested a little bit earlier on, I can't remember how many players, 8 to 10 or something like that. Yeah, from Angel Uth or Angel Uth. It might be that many players that need to come in, and cross that bridge when you come to it, obviously. I think that'll be a big split. The unpopular side is to cash in on a Kobbie Mainu when you get a bid like that. I think that would really, really, really be one of the final nails in the coffin in terms of hope and expectation. But if you're looking at it realistically, I think United need to raise money, because they're not, the way that they're playing at the moment, they're not going to win the Europa League. So a big sale might be the way that they fast track their way back. And for me, it would be I'd much more entertain a Garnacho sale than a Mainu sale, because I think there is in Amorim's final form team, I think Mainu could probably work in that central midfield role when the team are playing on the front foot, and when he has a midfield which is energetic enough to have an 8 that can carry the ball forward. He can play in the 10 as well. And I don't really want to see that happen. But I am mindful and realistic enough to say that if a big comes in for one of those 2 players, that would make a hell of a difference to the pot. And it's not a popular thing to say, but I'm just trying to, as always, I'm trying to take a realistic view of this. There's not many players in the squad at the moment that I think will be there for the long term. Yoro, Dorgu, Mazraoui, Ahmad, Collier, and Ugarte are good fits, and Rasmus Hojlund too, despite current form. Rasmus Hojlund isn't really going to be sold this summer. He might go out on loan, but we'll see. Look, let me know your thoughts on all those questions and all those comments in the comment section on YouTube and in the comment section on the audio platforms as well. It's look, there's going to be some difficult moments. Not only, well, there's going to be more difficult moments. There really is, and it's really worth just grinning and bearing it and trying to strap in and just be ready. But all these decisions that are made in the short term will be necessary for the success of the club in the future. And I don't want to see Kobbie Mainu leave, but I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't think that I think there's no possibility of it. There is a possibility. And maybe in another episode to come, I'll be talking about the kind of players that I think can be took forward. In terms of the Tim Chapman comment there, I think most of those players that you mentioned there, I probably agree with. But let's move on. Rasmus Hojlund, there's a comment from Amos. I think I disagree with your opinion on Hojlund. This is where I said in the recent podcast against Arsenal, I said that Hojlund is young, 22 years old, and it's unfair, really, to, as much as we know that he does have some shortcomings, to pin all of the failures to win the game on him and that chance that Declan Rice ended up clearing. isn't exactly fair. That's just the way that it is at the moment. But I disagree with your opinion on Hojlund. We all need to stop using the age excuse every time he's being discussed. Confidence excuses are more tolerable. Would Hojlund have last season scored that chance? Most likely. Is he a bad player right now? Yes. Is it confidence? Yes, I believe so. But we can't keep making excuses for him. Not being able to shoot from there is not exclusively a confidence issue. You can understand he wants to give himself the best chance of scoring by getting a bit closer to the goalpost, but he needs to be smarter in the box. I believe his confidence will get a big boost when he scores a goal, even if it's a tap-in. We probably just need to give him a bit more time, but the club needs to do some serious work by getting some sports psychologists. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but it's for me, I have to kind of come back on the youth argument there and just say that there ain't too many. Look at Cole Palmer now. Cole Palmer's 22 years old and he missed a penalty yesterday. He had a great season last year and was massively impactful. And now he's getting criticism for not delivering at the levels that he was previously. But that's Cole Palmer, one of the best players in the country. You know, at Chelsea, he's having a difficult time. He's the same age. So I'm not comparing the two, obviously, but they do have something in common of being the same age and having to carry a lot of expectation on themselves for different reasons, because Hojlund's come in with expectation of delivering on goals to be a United number 9, and Cole Palmer set high standards for himself. So at these ages, you're going to go through difficult patches in form, especially if your team isn't playing well. And I think what happens with Hojlund, I'm not sure. If United want to go and sign a striker that is going to play all the time, then what does that mean for Rasmus Hojlund? Does he go out on loan somewhere else? Is he happy to be a rotation option? What happens? I don't know. But it's a difficult situation for him at the moment. King Eric 7 says, thanks for this, Scott. I don't envy you having to do this every week. It's a slog at the moment. I see traits in Rasmus that should make him a decent striker, but I just hope the experience of this season won't have lasting damage. The back heel against Fulham, I think it was, seemed to me as someone stuck in their own head and overthinking the simple things that should be second nature. The problem now is if we buy an experienced striker, would there be enough minutes to go around for both him and Obi as backups? I did just say something like that, so maybe we are on the same page there. It's United have a big decision to make, but I do think, again, I'll say this, United and their problem has been wing backs. And you saw in the Arsenal game, especially with Mazraoui and even Dalot to a point as well, I think they were getting forward in the second half a lot more than we've seen those two players get forward in this system in recent weeks. It turns out you make chances because of it. And United could have scored in the last few minutes through that Bruno Fernandes shot, which David Raya double saved. And that came from Mazraoui being in the box, making a nice turn and cutting it back. That's the way that United are going to end up scoring goals. And we saw some suggestions that this system that Amorim wants to play was working on the players that he has currently in that game. And they're not delivering it often enough, but you can see small signs. And when you have more players who are physically suited to play in this system, then maybe you'll see improvements and maybe you'll see chances created, more chances created for Rasmus Hojlund. He got more chances in that second half yesterday to score goals. I say yesterday, it depends when you're listening to this, but he got more chances in that small period than he has had over 20 odd games, really. It's a lot of it is down to the way that the team plays. I really do think that. And yes, you can criticize Hojlund for some of his shortcomings, but it's unrealistic to expect a 22-year-old to be the finished article. There's talk about Mateta. Like, he's been playing well and scoring goals for Palace for a couple of seasons, but I do remember a time where Mateta was playing for Crystal Palace and not scoring goals, and people were talking about him being a dud. And that was just a couple of years ago. So things can change really, really quickly. And I do need to talk about that one as well in a future episode. But anyway, a couple of questions on Bruno Fernandes and playmakers. Atheon R4478, who's commenting on the podcast yesterday. I took a reply in a conversation about Bruno Fernandes. Now, I'm very much in the camp of you shouldn't really be criticizing Bruno Fernandes of all people now, but I'm not like privy to the fact that, and Rob used to say this a lot as well, that Bruno was quite wasteful. And I think this is an opinion really shared. Maybe it's not the right time to have that conversation, but maybe it is, He said, I felt like Bruno holds us back because everything has to go through him. He gives the ball away easily, and the only system he works in is one in which we sit deep and counter. He's not made for modern football. He's also too chaotic and vacates spaces in midfield. He cannot drive with the ball, can't dribble, can't press, and gets outpaced in midfield. And the eye test doesn't lie. I know he's created a lot, great. We're 14th and have been mediocre for a long while with him at the top. He shows up for dead rubber games. Where has this been the whole season? We're 14th and he's our captain. I know you like him, that's okay, but you won't make me like him or appreciate him. He's also 30, only going to get slower. We need to think about replacing him ASAP if we're smart, but we have a guy on a 300k contract. And there's another comment here from Unite558 a couple of weeks ago. I've got a footballing question for you. Wouldn't you agree a football team plays in the playmaker's image? Wouldn't you agree the playmaker dictates how the team plays football? And look, it's not, for me, I don't think it's the right time to have this conversation, because I don't think Bruno Fernandes is the guy that you criticize when you look at this team at the moment, given what he is contributing to this version of the team. Right? But I do understand why the criticism comes, because as the first comment there mentioned, there's some valid points in there. There are some valid points in there. And I don't think that if I look at this team now, I don't look at Bruno Fernandes straight away and I don't think you need to go right now. I don't think that at all. And I don't think many people should, but I do understand that there are some people like this who feel that way about Bruno Fernandes, and that's okay. Everyone can have their opinion, but you see the comparisons between Odegaard and Bruno Fernandes, and if you have a team with a system that is, I think the difference between Bruno Fernandes and Martin Odegaard, and you can have your preferences, and I prefer Bruno Fernandes personally, but in a system that works, that gets a team towards the top of the league, the way that Martin Odegaard recycles the ball and keeps it and creates chances, he hasn't been great this season, by the way, and I will say that, but he maybe is more of a system fit than Bruno Fernandes is, because Bruno Fernandes is the type of player that needs to have everything going around him. And I don't think that's incorrect. I really don't. And you see that the best times that Bruno Fernandes has had in this team is when he was playing that number 10 in Ollie's system, probably, where everything was going through him. He could drop in, he could turn on the ball, and you'd have Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho or Mason Greenwood or another player running on to the balls that Bruno Fernandes would play in between centre-backs or in between the centre-back and the full-back, getting those players running forward and running towards goal with long defense-splitting passes. That's where Bruno Fernandes is best. And I have to give credit to Bruno Fernandes at the moment because of the way that he is behaving, the way that he is leading the team through a difficult time. But I do think it's a valid point to say that when Ruben Amorim has this team in the exact way that he wants to play it, is Bruno Fernandes going to be in that team? I think it's a conversation that has to be had. He signed a contract recently till 2027, I think. I can't remember exactly. I think it was 3 years last year. So there's only a couple of years left. And he's also 30 years old. This is a conversation that's going to have to be had at some point. I don't think United are in a position at the moment really where that would be, in terms of all the players that you look at in the squad, I don't think that is the player that you look at and say he needs to go first at all. I think he's, if anything, really far down the list. Because I think if you lose that kind of influence on a team, especially with Bruno Fernandes playing deciding games or showing up in moments as much as he is at the moment, then United are going to lose a hell of a lot. And you dread to think where they would be without Bruno Fernandes at the moment. You really do. So I sit in that camp. But at the same time, I'm not going to come here and say, no, Bruno Fernandes should never be, his position in the team should never be questioned. Because ultimately, what Ruben Amorim is going to want is a system that works well enough for himself. And if Bruno can adapt to that in the left 10 or something like that, or develop into the deep midfielder, properly and be working in a team in that system that is competing towards the top of the table, is that the right fit? I don't exactly know yet. And I have said recently as well that with the summer coming up where there might be some unpopular sales, if Bruno Fernandes looks at this and United finish 14th or 15th in the league and they don't win the Europa League, And Bruno Fernandes is 30, 31 years old. And he decides that he wants to go somewhere to try and win titles. I don't doubt for a second that there will be some interest in him from somewhere else, given the influence that he can hold on teams. In a system that works, in the kind of 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 kind of system that other teams play that are competing for titles, I think he can really excel. And I would not hold it against him at all. I think he's given United his best years. And ultimately, the club have sold him short because they have underdelivered during that time. So if it's on Bruno Fernandes already, I know he signed a new contract last summer, but that's not to say that that situation can't change. And I've been warning for a while. I've warned in this episode, you might have to be ready for some uncomfortable conversations. I don't know where it's going to come from. Could be Garnacho, could be Kobe Mainu, could even be Bruno Fernandes, could be some, I don't know. But it's just very wise at the moment, I think, to just prepare yourself for some difficult moments and difficult departures in terms of the players that we do. I like Bruno Fernandes, I really do. But I understand and appreciate that there are different perspectives on that. And I think there's valid points. Again, I go back to the days where Rob and I would have debates and conversations about Bruno Fernandes, and Rob was very much in this camp as well for a while, even though he understood and he loved Bruno as well. You can, not everything has to be, this or that. You can have a bit of a mix and understand that there are some points in a conversation that you have to concede, even while you can have a different point of view. That's the beauty of podcasting, I guess. Some general comments as well, just to finish up. Jonathan Ball, thanks for your support as always, mate. This is from a few weeks ago, but I think it's still pertinent. United just aren't fun at the moment, exacerbated by ex-player and media trolling and our own fan base apoplectic meltdowns. It's exhausting at the moment. That is basically how it is. That is how it's been for a long, long time. And we have a rare Monday today where United played relatively well against Arsenal yesterday. It's nowhere near where they should be again, but generally, that's the feeling. It's exhausting. I completely agree. And if you don't, I had a listener message me on Twitter the other day saying, "Sorry, Scott, I just had a notification about your podcast coming through, but I can't listen to it. It's been 3-4 months now where I just can't listen to United podcasts because I'm so done." And that is how that's how a lot of people feel. So I felt like that as well. I'm the one doing the podcast. So it's incredibly difficult, especially when you're on your own. You can't share that pain. I think this is my outlet to be able to share my frustrations and share my thoughts. And I really appreciate all the support that I do get. But I also understand at the same time, if you just want to get away from it and get away from all the noise, especially when Tim Howard's coming out and saying nonsense like he was saying about the Glazer family last week, it's fine. You deal with this in the way that you feel like you can. And sometimes, honestly, I wish I could shut it all off too, but I think I have to keep doing it. Anyway, Elite Baller 2023. Scott, I'll keep saying this until you do it. Make your videos live and interactive. We no longer have Rob here. We're counting on you to provide reason and balanced content. Making it live means that we can interact with you. It will help us and it will help you. Please understand how many creators thrive on spinning everything as a negative. Appreciate you, Scott. Thanks. Yeah, I do try not to spin everything as a negative. I can't really thrive in that environment. And I hear you. I got to say, I'm just not really confident enough at the moment. So maybe I do need more comments like that to, if you think I should do lives, then I would really appreciate some feedback on it and some encouragement to do it. Because I've been thinking about it for a while. But I think what I need to do if I'm going to establish a live is do it at a regular time each day. And it will definitely help. But at the same time, I go back to the negative feelings and this kind of thing. It's probably the hardest time to start doing that at the moment because everything is so negative. Maybe in the next few weeks, hopefully things turn around. It'd be a lot easier for me to establish that pattern. And yeah, but thanks for your comment. I really appreciate it. And then a final one. Yeah. What exactly is the purpose of this podcast? Honestly, the social media is awash with podcasts nowadays that are not well thought out. Rannick told, this is the comment, Rannick told us about this open heart surgery 3 years ago. Can we just reduce all this empty noise and allow the coach to do the work? Well, kind of a double meaning in that. I think I do agree with what you've been saying. Can we just reduce all this empty noise and allow the coach to do the work? I think what the purpose of this podcast is to try and move away from all the negative noise that you do get. Because I think, if anything, this podcast is in the majority of trying to take a positive or step back outlook on it, rather than just saying everything is terrible all the time, because that's most of it at the moment. That's most of it, whether it's from the team itself, whether it's from the decisions that the club are making, whether that's from pundit coverage expecting Man United to be challenging for titles, even though the club have been run into the ground over the course of 20 years. That's just not the way. So it's that's the purpose of the podcast, and that's what I try and do. That's what I try and bring. And maybe it's not the one for everyone, but I really do appreciate all the support and all the comments that are coming in. But yeah, I think that's all I've got for now. And that's the end of the QA. But really appreciate all the support that you guys do offer. Like I say, with that comment just a few minutes ago, making videos live and interactive, I really appreciate some support. If you I think it's a confidence issue and a happiness issue and a wanting to get out of the negative space issue. But I know that there's other people, maybe, and people who listen to this, who come to this podcast for reason takes that I try and offer that can make you feel better. If I'm not feeling good enough about it as it is, then it's difficult for me to share that positivity. But it's easier to do on days where you've just seen a performance the day before where it looks like the players give a damn. So, or the players are doing the right things. I think that's maybe a little bit unfair, because of all the times that in the past where I think the players haven't really give a damn, I think there's definitely times in the past where you can say that. I wouldn't really say that this season that's been a problem. I think it's been an ability thing rather than an attitude thing recently. But yeah, that's it for this QA episode. I do want to do more of these, so if there are more comments, I will keep a track of them and maybe double back in certain periods to just talk about what the hot topics are or what your thoughts are. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate the support as always from everybody. And please keep them coming. This is the Promised Land podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all audio platforms, also on YouTube as well. Please like the video, leave a comment below, as I've been saying throughout all this, and subscribe to the channel. And also subscribe on these audio platforms as well. Give a 5-star review and leave a comment there as well if you have not done so already and would like to get involved. Also follow me on social media at @Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm also on Blue Sky. Link is in the description as well. I'll see you soon for another Promised Land podcast episode. I want to talk about the likes of Andre Onana, maybe Kobe Manu coming up. There's a big game in the Europa League coming up as well this week, but we'll see how things develop. We'll see how things go. And obviously there's big decisions to be made over the course of the summer, which is approaching. And if United are going out of Europe, then that conversation is going to pivot straight away to what happens next. And maybe United can go on with a projection of what their budget's going to be, even though it's going to be awful. And at least they can start making decisions based on knowing what they've got. But anyway, this has been the Promised Land. Thanks, everyone, for your support. And thanks for listening. Until next time, I've been Scott. See you soon.